Joining us now from our studios in Fort Lee is Terry Jones, one of the great stars of Monty Python. Although he wears a number of hats as comedian, writer, and director, he is perhaps best known as a member of Monty Python. Tonight he joins us to talk about life and to settle the score once and for all on the existence of fairies in a newly released work which is called Lady Cottington's Pressed Fairy Book, a copy of which you see there on the screen. Now, let me ask you first of all, and by the way, Terry, thanks for coming on. We're big fans here, and we appreciate you joining us.
It's great to be here.
You're not kidding about this, are you?
No, I detected a certain levity in your introduction at the top of the show, Tom. I was a bit
well,
worried about that.
I'm surprised because I mean, I could understand fairy tales, but when we get to the Pressed Fairy Book, I begin to think, is somebody pulling my leg?
Well, this is one of the most astounding publications this century, I think, Tom, you know. The book was discovered in Lady Cottington's attic after Lady Cottington died in 1991. And it turns out that Lady Cottington, as a young girl, discovered that if she sat at the bottom of the garden, the fairies would, with her pressed flower book open on her knee, the fairies would come fluttering around, as they do at the bottom of the garden, and eventually, one, being inquisitive little creatures, one would land on the open pages of her flower book. All she needed to do was go like that, and she'd catch it.
Well, she'd
kill it.
She'd kill it is what she'd do.
Yep, you squash it. Yeah. But she says you have to put quite a bit of pressure until either the squealing stops or there's a sort of squashing sensation. And you must be careful, you know, you don't get bits, arms, and legs hanging off over the side, otherwise you trim them off. You know. And anyway, then she'd found she'd have an impression of the fairy, sometimes a goblin, actually on the book. So instead of collecting pressed flowers, she collected pressed fairies.
Oh, I see. And where was it that Lady Cottington lived when she died? Where was her castle?
She lived in Bovey. It's a sort of, it's a little village in Cornwall or Devon, I think.
You think?
Well, I think it is, yes. Cornwall, Devon, yes.
And so what attracted you, considering all the interest that you have, what attracted you to this remarkable story of a woman who was able to squash fairies out of existence, as it were?
Well, you see, the thing was, she kept a diary alongside the fairies that she'd pressed, you see. And the book was taken to a friend of mine, Brian Froud, who is a world expert on fairies, to authenticate the actual images. But of course, Brian, being an artist, doesn't actually read words, so he asked me to actually read the diary and to check that it was suitable for publication. Because as soon as Brian gave me the book, I mean, I realized this is for the first time in human history we actually had physical evidence, physical remains, you might say, of fairies.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, first time ever. I mean, Tom, have you ever had doubts about fairies yourself?
I've often wondered about them. That's all I can say. What would you describe as a fairy? What would be your definition of a fairy?
Well, it's difficult, really. It's like, I mean, I'm not an expert on fairies, Tom. I mean, I've never seen one, and I've had my own. I have to say, I've had my own doubts about whether they exist. And I mean, that's what was so exciting about this, to actually have, you know, the evidence. I mean, looking at it and seeing what Lady Cottington refers to as fairies, it's like you know a fairy when you see it.
Exactly. Yes. Well put, sir. Very well put.
And then when it's a goblin...
Let me do a little commercial with that bit of wisdom in the grist mill, and we'll continue here talking more about Lady Cottington. We're back with Terry Jones of Monty Python, whose newest book is called the Lady Cottington's Pressed Fairy Book. You know, I was just reading about this, you know, and there's more here than meets the eye. I know you've read this material, but there's something in here. May I read something?
What?
May I read something from your book?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
You know, she's writing here, Terry, about when these fairies came flying around when she was sitting outside, you know, in the garden at the castle, right?
Yeah.
And she says, "Go away," I shouted at them, but they just turned around and bared their bottoms at me. Whereupon I seized up my book and blat, I got them both in one smack, serves them right.
Yes. I think the fairies did start getting very rude to Lady Cottington. And they did like showing their bottoms rather a lot.
Yeah, well, as she writes here, it is so indecent a picture that I am now scarcely able to look in my own precious book, let alone invite others to spy upon it.
Well, absolutely. You notice there is a section of the book at the end where Lady Cottington herself has sealed it off for the protection of...
You know, I hold that in my hand. Would it be terribly shocking to the television audience if we were to, in fact, reveal the shocking contents of this book.
No, I know. I mean, by all means. I mean, you know, they were shocking to Lady Coddington.
Yeah.
They're not that shocking to us, perhaps.
Although it might not help the sales of said book if we were to give away the surprise ending.
Oh, that's true, yes, and you don't want to alter that, because it really is a very good gift.
Yeah.
Which, coincidentally, you know, not only is it an important book, but a very attractively produced one.
Well, wait, let me say the one thing that'll really guarantee success for this book, okay? Watch the screen up. Folks, it's an ideal stocking stuffer. What do you think, huh?
Tom, I believe, you know, we don't know very much about Lady Coddington herself. But we did, she was very reclusive. I think because the fairies became so rude to her that I think she started identifying her own sort of repressed sexuality with the activities of the fairies.
Could well be. You know, we have a clip of Lady Coddington on film I'd like to show.
Oh, right, yes.
So with your permission, I'm going to run that now.
This is a very, very rare bit of footage from the 1930s.
All right, fine. Lady Coddington on your screens, believe it or not.
To catch a fairy, one simply sat with one's book open and waited for the fairy to alight upon the page, and then you have to apply a firm, even pressure all round, quite a lot of weight. When I was younger, I used to have to jump up and down on the book. And you keep pressing until either the squealing stops or there's a sort of squashing sensation. Otherwise, if you open the book up, you'll find fairies still waggling around. It's most unpleasant. You'll be surprised what fairies will waggle at you. You must be careful not to let any bits of fairy dangle over the sides, otherwise you have to trim them off later. It's rather like making a pie.
You know, Lady Coddington is remarkable in sounding like Julia Child, don't you think?
Like who?
Julia Child, the cook.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
How old was the dear when we saw her there?
She was, well, she must have been in her 60s, I think.
Yeah.
Late 30s, that was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go to the phones. Here is Nancy in Lima, Ohio. Hello.
Good evening, you guys.
Good evening, Nancy.
Nancy.
How are you?
I'm enjoying this show just so much. It's
Okay.
so funny. I just get laughing like crazy.
Well, so am I. You know why, Nancy? Because this guy's nuts.
Yes.
Look, Tom, I didn't come on this show to be laughed at, Tom.
Sorry, sir.
Oh, Terry.
Hello, Nancy.
Hi. I followed your career through Monty Python and just love it. I still play all the tapes and everything and get a good, huge chuckle out of them all the time. What writing influence did you have with the rest of the group, you know, with Monty Python?
Well, the six of us used to write the shows, really, basically, and we all kind of were equal, really. I used to write with Mike Palin. So he and I suppose Mike and I sort of wrote the bulk of the stuff, I mean, a lot of the stuff. And then John and Graham would come in with these really great things like the Parrot sketch, and Eric would come in with wonderful things like Nudge Nudge, and you know, Mike and I would sort of labour away with a lot of dross and things, but it was pretty equal spread, actually, in the actual writing.
Yeah, a communal effort, so to speak.
Yeah.
There you go, Nancy.
Terry?
Yeah?
Can I ask you, this book looks very exciting, a riot. Could I ask Tom if I could have it? Could he mail it to me?
Yeah, I would ask him, actually, so long as he bought the copy.
Nancy, you want it, you got it.
Bless your heart.
All right, bless your heart and have a happy Halloween, okay?
You too.
All right, put her on hold, we'll send her the book. You're a good sport, Terry. Thanks for coming on with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Okay, pleasure.
All right, Terry is the author of Lady Coddington's Pressed Fairy book, which is out now, and as I've said before, folks, it does make the ideal stocking stuffer. Back tomorrow night.